Welcome to Rise Untold, where the stories behind the spotlight come alive. 18 years. That's almost 2 decades. That's a generation of children growing up, entire careers being built, lives being reshaped, and that's how long it has taken for the estate of one man, James Brown, the Godfather of Soul, to find any kind of resolution. When Brown passed away on Christmas Day in 2006, the world mourned the loss of an icon, a man who transformed music, who inspired generations, who gave us I Got You, I Feel Good, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, and It's a Man's World. His voice, his energy, his influence, they reshaped American music forever. But what followed his death wasn't just grief. It was chaos, because James Brown didn't just leave behind a legacy of sound. He left behind an estate worth millions, and with it he left behind questions that would split families, drain fortunes, and drag his name through courts for nearly 2 decades. Brown had a vision, a will, a trust. He wanted his estate to fund scholarships for poor children in South Carolina and Georgia, the very places where he grew up in poverty. He wanted his success to create opportunity for others, for kids who, like him, had been told they would never escape. But almost from the moment his body was laid to rest, that vision fell apart. At the center of the storm was Tommy Ray Heine, the woman who claimed to be his wife. She was a singer who had performed with Brown and said she had married him in 2001, but soon her marriage was challenged. Questions surfaced about her past, about a previous marriage that had never been fully dissolved. Lawyers argued. Courts battled. Was she really his wife? Was she entitled to inherit? For years, the case dragged on. At one point, a court even declared her the legal spouse. But later, the South Carolina Supreme Court overturned it all, ruling she had never been lawfully married to Brown. 18 years later, that question finally had an answer. But by then, the damage was done. Because while Tommy Ray Heine was fighting for recognition, Brown's children were fighting too. Several of his heirs stepped forward, each demanding their share. Some supported his will, others challenged it. And as they fought, the estate's executors, the people meant to carry out Brown's last wishes, turned on one another. Some were accused of mismanagement. Some were fired. New ones were brought in. It was a revolving door of lawyers, trustees, and judges, each adding more delays, more confusion, and more costs. Brown's estate wasn't simple. It wasn't just a bank account or a few properties. It was a musical empire. Publishing rights, master recordings, trademarks, likeness, real estate. The very things that fueled his career were now weapons in a war over control. And so, for nearly 2 decades, instead of sending scholarships to poor children, Brown's estate sent millions into the pockets of lawyers. The dream he wrote down in black and white was drowned out by the noise of endless litigation. But in 2021, a breakthrough finally came. After almost 15 years of chaos, a massive deal was struck. Primary Wave Music, one of the most powerful companies in the publishing world, stepped in and bought the majority of Brown's estate, his catalog, his rights, his business assets. In a deal valued at $90 million on paper, it was a victory. At last, there was a way forward. At last, the estate had cash. At last, there was hope that Brown's dream of scholarships could finally become reality. But even that wasn't the end. Because while the deal provided money, it didn't erase the scars. Lawsuits still linger. Some heirs still feel cheated. Accusations of mismanagement still echo. And the scholarships, the very heart of James Brown's will, are only now beginning to take shape, nearly 2 decades too late. This story isn't just about money. It's about legacy. James Brown fought his way out of poverty. He was born in a one-room shack in Barnwell, South Carolina. He grew up during the Jim Crow era. He spent time in reform school as a teenager. By every measure, the odds were against him. And yet, he rose. He turned struggle into soul. He became one of the most electrifying performers of all time, and he never forgot where he came from. That's why his will mattered. That's why his vision mattered. because he didn't want his story to end with him. He wanted it to continue through children who would never have to feel the hopelessness he once felt. But instead, for 18 years, his dream was trapped in court filings, legal jargon, and family disputes. For 18 years, the Godfather of Soul's greatest gift, his legacy, was silenced. There's an irony here. James Brown was known for his discipline, for running his band like a drill sergeant, for demanding perfection, for never letting chaos define his stage. But in death, chaos consumed him. The very control he had in life vanished, replaced by years of uncertainty. And yet, maybe there's still time. Maybe the scholarships will finally begin to flow. Maybe children in South Carolina and Georgia will get the opportunities Brown wanted them to have. Maybe his estate, scarred as it is, will still honor his name. The story of James Brown's estate is a warning about how fragile legacy can be, about how even the clearest will, the strongest vision can collapse if those left behind put their interests before the dream. It's also a lesson. That legacy isn't just about what you leave behind, but about whether those who survive you are willing to protect it. James Brown once said, "I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door, I'll get it myself." It wasn't just a lyric, it was his life. Those words summed up the fire inside him. The drive that took him from a boy born in a one-room shack in South Carolina to one of the greatest performers the world has ever seen. He didn't wait for handouts. He didn't sit back and hope opportunity would fall into his lap. He demanded the door be opened, and when it was, he stepped through it with everything he had. That was James Brown's philosophy. Work hard, earn your place, break through every barrier they put in front of you. And that's exactly what he did. He broke through poverty. He broke through racism. He broke through the rules of music itself, reshaping rhythm and soul until the world had no choice but to stop and listen. But here's the thing. James Brown didn't just open doors for himself. He opened them for others, for the musicians who came after him, for the artists who borrowed his sound, his swagger, his stage presence, for a generation of performers who watched him, studied him, and realized they too could rise. He opened doors for music, for culture, for America. And now, even in death, the question is whether those doors can stay open. Because what James Brown wanted most at the end of his life wasn't more fame. It wasn't more money. It was opportunity. For children who grew up the way he did. Kids in South Carolina and Georgia who knew what it meant to be poor, to feel hopeless, to think the world wasn't built for them. He wanted his estate to give them scholarships, to give them education, to give them a chance. That was his final dream, his last gift. For nearly 2 decades, that dream has been trapped in legal battles, delayed by greed, lost in arguments that had nothing to do with the children he wanted to help. But maybe, just maybe, the chaos will finally clear. Maybe now, with his estate sold for $90 million, the dream will breathe again. Maybe the money will flow the way he intended. Maybe those doors will finally open. And when they do, they won't just be doors to classrooms or scholarships. They'll be doors to the same kind of future James Brown created for himself. A future where a child who had nothing suddenly sees possibility. A future where a young boy or girl believes they can rise higher than their circumstances. That's the true legacy of James Brown. Not just the music, not just the fame, but the proof that rising from nothing is possible. That no matter how stacked the odds are, no matter how deep the struggle runs, there's always a way through. Because if James Brown could rise from poverty, from racism, from hardship, if he could fight his way to the top and still hold on to the dream of helping others, then maybe that dream can rise too. And if James Brown could rise, maybe you can too.